Hi, everybody. I'm very happy to introduce you to Pat Murphy, who is running in Iowa's District 1. This is another one where you have a real progressive who's running against the establishment-supported, corporate-backed Democrat. And so remember, we've got this two-pronged political revolution going on here. We have that which is happening in the country and also that which is happening within the Democratic Party. Let me introduce you to a gentleman who spent 25 years in the state legislature in the state of Iowa, including 4 years as the Speaker of the House there. Pat Murphy. Hi, how are you?
Thanks, Marianne. It's nice to be on here today.
Thank you so much. Now, I know LGBT equality, labor and income issues, fair pay, raising the minimum wage, Social Security, supporting Medicare for all, environment, climate change. Obviously, you're the real progressive in this race. Tell us, obviously, you spent 25 years in the House in Iowa. What's the fire in your belly taking this forward? What do you need from progressives around the country? What is your sense of what's happening in the country? Tell me what's on your mind.
Well, the big reason I'm running is I really do believe I can make a difference. In the 25 years, 26 years that I was in the Iowa legislature, I really did believe I could make a difference. When I was Speaker of the House, we were able to do a lot of progressive things like raising the minimum wage. And that was the first bill we did when we took control. But we didn't stop there. We did universal preschool for 4-year-olds. We have 20,000 children in the state of Iowa now that get quality preschool, and we spend $69 million a year on just those 4-year-olds, giving them universal preschool, and it's available to everybody in the state of Iowa. But along with that, we kept a focus on education. Teacher pay had actually dipped to 42nd in the nation in Iowa, and Iowa's noted for its education, but it's going to be pretty hard to keep teachers. So we decided to raise the pay over a 4-year period so we could make sure that we got back up to the national average, which we did. But along with those things, we did some other things as well. We raised the cigarette tax $1. We took all of that money and we dumped it into a healthcare fund. And that healthcare fund we used for Medicaid expansion, and we used it for healthcare expansion through what we call our Healthy and Well Kids of Iowa, which is called Hawkeye. It's the Hawkeye State because the University of Iowa Hawkeyes, and that's how it got its name. But the Healthy and Well Kids program and the Medicaid expansion ended up including 63,000 children, and CMS estimated that we had about 60,000 children that didn't have access to health insurance. And we were able to take care of pretty much 99% between 99 and 100% of all the children in the state of Iowa that didn't have access to health care. In addition to those things, though, too, we also made sure that we protected women's rights. We expanded family planning services while I was Speaker. We made sure that we didn't have any ridiculous debates about restricting women's access to health care. And we also expanded stem cell research. And here's why that's so important. This was a very emotional debate that was created by the Republicans, and they made it an abortion issue. But stem cell research here in Iowa has led the University of Iowa to looking at reversing blindness for people with macular degeneration. And they're actually looking at reversing blindness and hearing loss based on the legislation we passed back in 2007. And then we also did an LGBT civil rights bill in 2007, and we were able to get a little bit of bipartisan support on that bill. So we were able to do some very progressive things. And probably the thing that we're remembered most for is, here's Iowa in the middle of the country. You have New York on the east end, you have California on the west end, and Iowa became just the third state in the nation to allow marriage equality. And as the Speaker of the House, after that ruling came down on a 7-0 vote by the Iowa Supreme Court, 7-0 in favor of marriage equality, I had to prevent numerous attempts, over a half a dozen attempts at changing the state constitution so that they wouldn't try to put discrimination back into our Constitution. And I made a very strong statement that day on that ruling, which was, I believe the Constitution is an affirmative document that guarantees us all a set of rights in this country, and that if you change the Constitution to have a negative connotation in it, such as saying, well, you have all these rights, but except for this little instance, I think it fails as a document. And so I decided that the most important thing we could do was preserve this court ruling, and we were able to do that. And I'm very proud of the fact that it is now nationwide throughout the country. But I think that leads to some of the stuff we need to talk about in regards to Congress, because, quite frankly, one of the things that hasn't been addressed with the Supreme Court ruling at the federal level is we do have marriage equality, but now you have couples that are getting married and then they're coming in and wanting to get access to health insurance or housing or other issues. And you have state legislatures across the country now that are trying to put discrimination into laws. And along with that, we need to pass an Equality Act, which the Human Rights Campaign is campaigning for, that just doesn't address employment, but housing and other parts of a person's life as well, so that they have the same rights and conditions of opposite-sex couples as well as for same-sex couples.
That's interesting to me because I assumed that once you were married, those things were de facto.
And see, this is a problem because they're finding out that in some states, couples are starting to run into some of these issues. And see, in Iowa, we don't because we're one of 18 states that currently has civil rights protections for same-sex couples. But there are other states, and you can take large states such as Texas, but you have border states along Iowa like Missouri or Nebraska where you have no protections. So if you do get married as a same-sex couple in those states, you may get married, but you may want to keep it quiet because you're afraid of what your employer might do in regards to benefits or your employment.
You know, this thing about Iowa is so interesting because Iowa's sort of in the national news right now because of this bill there about the possibility of children under the age of 14 being able to legally handle handguns, which to most of us is just so outrageous. So Iowa seems to be one of those states where you see this enormous dichotomy between some of the most progressive sentiments and some of the least progressive sentiments, which I assume is also some of what you will face in Congress. What's your sense of that? What's your sense of that as an Iowan, and what's your sense of that as an American? What's going on?
Well, I would say that in Iowa, you're correct. We have a very this is a state that's considered a toss-up state every election cycle. And it's sort of weird because we're first in the nation caucuses, but then because we're such a toss-up state, and we do have 6 electoral votes here, so you have everybody pouring into the state here, both in the caucuses for 6 months or a year preceding, but then after that, you also have a bunch of people coming into the state after all the primaries are done, putting people on TV because of it being a toss-up state. So for that reason, we get a lot of attention. But the other part is you're correct. We do have a very progressive state. Iowa allowed the first woman to practice law in the country in our state. We got Brown versus the Board of Education right 78 years before Brown versus the Board of Education. We got it right in the 1800s. We also got right, we have the issue when Iowa was a territorial state and it wasn't a full state yet. And it was in the matter of the man named Ralph, and Ralph was a slave that was brought here by his, at that time considered his owner. And the Iowa Supreme Court ruled that no man could own another man. So we've been very progressive, but the problem we have too is we also have a lot of very conservative folks. And you're right, we do have a lot of legislation. And as the Speaker of the House, I killed a lot of that legislation that would prohibit quite frankly,
total insanity.
One of the questions that was asked on the House floor was, if a 2-year-old wants to handle a gun, there's nothing to prohibit that in the legislation. And the answer to that question was, you're correct. And I don't think anybody in their right mind thinks a 2-year-old should be handling a gun, let alone a 6-year-old or an 8-year-old or a 10-year-old or a 12-year-old. And quite frankly, you have to be 16 to drive a license without your parent, and yet we're going to allow 8-year-olds a handgun, and you can do a lot more damage with a handgun than you can with a car.
I'm thrilled that we've had the opportunity to expose you to so many people who agree with that. Are there any sort of final words that you'd like to say? I know your website is patmurphyforcongress.com. Your primary date is June 7th. My hope is that people will support you, that they will send in some dollars to support you, tell all their friends in Iowa to support you. Any final words that you'd like to say about how you're going to just take your fire to the U.S. Congress?
We need to make sure that college education is affordable for every child. And whether they're going to a community college or to a 4-year institution, they shouldn't be racked with tens of thousands of dollars of debt. And so we need to make sure we have people that are going to focus on the real issues of higher education, making it affordable, making sure that 4-year-olds have access to quality preschool, making sure everybody has quality access to health care. But along with that, having that social safety net there through Medicare and Medicaid, as well as the Social Security as well. So I will just tell people what I've been saying on the campaign trail. I've been fighting for working class families for the last 26 years, and that if you give me that chance, I will go to Washington, D.C., and I will continue that fight in the future.
Well, you know what? I believe you. I believe everything that you just said. I know that you will. And I hope that you get a chance to. And I know that I can feel that a lot of people who are exposed to your work would feel the same way. I hope enough of them will be in Iowa. And I wish you the very, very best. And I very much look forward to talking to you again after June 7th when you are the nominee, and making sure that we go on from there onto November and get you into the House. I look forward to that day. It will give me, and I think a lot of people, a very big smile.
Thank you. I
Good
appreciate
luck
it.
to you.